All right. I think, yeah, we are officially on.
Great.
Awesome. So we have with us Gerry Dworkin. Gerry is the CEO of Lifesaving Resources. He's an aquatic expert. He focuses on training other water safety professionals and ice rescue, and he's got a water safety academy. He's been a EMS and firefighter for I don't know, just a cup of coffee, a little while. And I met him through the National Drowning Prevention Alliance and some of the other water safety work we do. And Gerry is an all-around fantastic dude, and I wanted to get him on because I know he's not only a great person, but super interesting, and his story is really unique. And I don't know enough of it, honestly. So I was curious myself to hear kind of the origin story of Gerry and where he came from and kind of the whole deal. So did I miss anything? Did I get it?
Pretty clear.
That summed it up briefly.
Yep.
Awesome. And so this is our second one, like I was telling you a minute ago. So it's really exciting. This is our first time using this setup. So if I screw this up somehow, that's why. But yeah, so right off the bat, why don't you go ahead and explain your literally your origin story? If you were a superhero and you had an origin story, how does yours begin and how does it go?
Well, during high school and college, I worked as a lifeguard and pool manager. Mm-hmm. And while in college, I also became a volunteer firefighter. And when I graduated college, I became an EMT.
Okay.
And
what made you want to do that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But between the lifeguarding and the firefighter and the EMT, it was a pretty good start to where I am today. And
sure.
When I graduated college, my first job was with the American Red Cross, and I worked for them for 14 years. My first job was covering New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania as a field representative, training and supervising instructors, instructor trainers in first aid and water safety and CPR. My second job, I went to Westchester County, New York for 7 years, and then Houston for 5 years, and then up to national headquarters for a year and a half. And then I decided I wanted to write my own curriculums and do my own thing. So we started Lifesaving Resources.
When was that?
That was in 1985, I believe.
Okay. So up until then, you'd been doing just EMS and firefighter and
EMS firefighter and Red Cross. And
right.
I maintained my EMT. I was also an EMT instructor in New York and Houston and so forth. And when we relocated to Virginia, I also became a career firefighter at that time with the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department. And then in 97, I believe, we relocated to New Hampshire with the company. And I became a firefighter for the Harrisville, New Hampshire Fire Department.
Okay.
And then we relocated to Kennebunkport 7 years ago. And now I'm a firefighter with Kennebunkport and an EMT with the Kennebunkport EMS system.
Is that still in the same state?
I'm in Maine now.
Man, you move a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, one step ahead of the law.
Is that
so? But we're hoping George Bush will be back up here in a couple of weeks, and we always enjoy seeing the Bush family around here.
Does he live up there?
Oh yeah. He typically comes up here from mid-April until mid-October, and as soon as his wife passed away, he went into the hospital, and he keeps saying, I can't wait to get out and get back up to Kennebunkport. So we're hoping he makes it up here.
That's fantastic. So you started Lifesaving Resources in 1980?
85.
85.
Yeah.
That's not to date both of us here, but I was 3 years old then. That's exciting.
I was 4.
Yeah, very perfect. Exactly. You look at So, you started in 1985, and I mean, I imagine, so you started it to write curriculum, right?
Well, our mission has always been to mitigate drowning and aquatic injuries, and our company is dedicated to drowning and aquatic injury prevention and emergency management. And in that regard, we develop curriculums and conduct this training both nationally and internationally. And then I regularly consult as a forensics expert in drowning and aquatic injury cases.
Okay. So what change has the company made from 1985 to now? Is it still the same basic premise, or has it evolved?
It has evolved. We started as also a distributor for rescue products and such, training products. but it was more of a distraction from what we wanted to do, which was focus on consulting and training and so forth. Mm-hmm. So we've eliminated all products many years ago, and we're able to focus exactly on what we intended to do, which was drowning prevention and training programs and consulting services. So now we spend a lot of time training firefighters, law enforcement, EMS, and water rescue and ice rescue. We also do some lifeguard training and such. I've got speaking engagements all over the country and internationally, and enjoy doing the work we're doing as a forensics expert in drowning and aquatic injury cases.
So when someone hires you for a speaking engagement, what are they bringing you on to talk about?
Well, for instance, I've done a lot of work for the Club Managers Association of America. In fact, I'm heading down our Train the Trainer Academy in water rescue is the 17th through the 20th. As soon as we finish on the 20th, I jump a flight to Atlanta, and I'm speaking at the Georgia chapter of the Club Managers on the next day, and basically talking about the prevention, the recognition, management of drowning and aquatic injuries.
Gotcha. So that's general water safety info, not necessarily specific to ice water, right?
Correct. Correct.
So what is it? I mean, obviously you don't want to give your whole talk here, but what is the kind of the 60-second synopsis of what you tell people in those talks?
Well, these people are all the club managers of the country clubs and so forth throughout Georgia. Mm-hmm. So my focus will be on the need to basically hire qualified lifeguard personnel by screening them, checking their credentials and so forth, and then providing site-specific pre-service and in-service training to be sure they're qualified to work at their facilities. And then basically I advocate the need for them to conduct a threat assessment, determine the hazards and the risks that exist, remove or warn of the hazards, prohibit or safeguard the risks, determine the level of operational capability that's required of their personnel, and then basically in a nutshell, they need to train for, plan for, and acquire the resources necessary to deal with the incidents that may occur.
Got it. So you mentioned before we got started that hopefully you didn't get an actual fire call while we're on the call here. And I was surprised that you're still an active EMS and firefighter.
I am. I've been an EMT now for 45 years.
That's amazing.
My EMT was supposed to expire in March, and I decided in October that I would renew it one more time. So between October and January, basically, I was able to accumulate all the CEH hours required to be recertified.
That's impressive.
So, but this is my last time as an EMT. How long I'll continue as a firefighter depends on how long I can crawl on the floor without passing out with air pack on and 200 pounds worth of gear on my back.
So how long will it last? How long does your certification last?
3 years in the state of Maine. Yeah. Gotcha.
And if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 68.
Oh, wow. So you will be 71 when it wraps up. Yeah, that's fantastic. And the fact that you can still do it is amazing. You know, not that 68 is all that old, but you know, I know guys that are younger than you who couldn't even begin to do that. You know.
Well, in October, or November, I decided I'm going to try to fly down a set of stairs carrying 6-foot sheets of plexiglass.
Oh, geez.
And it didn't work, so that put me out of commission for a couple months. But it did allow me to do a lot of my CEH online while I was laying in bed. So that
helps. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're still actively working, you said you actually were called for a fire recently, right?
I had 2 fire calls yesterday, one structure fire, and I forgot what the second one was, but structure fire. And day before Monday, I worked as EMT for chems. So things get exciting every now and then.
So if you don't mind me asking, what is your role on the truck for a fire or an EMT situation? What is your job specifically?
Well, as an EMT, it's to provide patient care and support the medic that's on board, also to drive the ambulance. But as a firefighter, it depends. I didn't
know if you had a specialization.
No. Yeah. We have in Kennebunkport, we have 4 fire stations, and we have a variety of engines and brush trucks and boats and ladder trucks and rescue trucks and such. So it all depends on the call. Yesterday, as an example, the fire station's right across the street from my office, and we have a ladder truck there. And because I'm an interior firefighter, if there's a non-interior firefighter who's qualified to drive the truck is showing up, I'd let them drive it so I can suit up and go into the fire.
Gotcha.
If there isn't a driver showing up, then I'll take the truck and operate the truck until I can be relieved.
Gotcha. So I know that your focus as a first responder and in general is on water safety. Are first responders in general trained in ice and water safety?
They are not. They certainly should be. And as an example, in Maine, where we have a strong waterfront coast line and so forth. It's our opinion that all firefighters in Maine should be trained at the water rescue awareness and the ice rescue awareness level, and that they need to, based on the threat assessment, determine the level of operational capability and have personnel trained at the technician level if they have a threat within their area. And that goes throughout the country. Obviously, Florida firefighters don't need to be trained in ice rescue, but they certainly need to be trained in water rescue.
For sure.
And,
I mean, oceans, pools,
Right. So it's our opinion that in water rescue, that every firefighter should be trained at the water rescue awareness level. They need to be provided with some survival skills. And again, if they have water, regardless of the venue within their jurisdiction, they need to have a team trained at the technician level as well.
So if they're not providing specific training, a EMT or fire crew, now that comes to a water safety emergency, what do they do? How do they even know to begin? Do they just wing it? I mean,
exactly. That's the expectation from the public, that they're going to be able to put on their capes and do all their superhero things.
Sure. Yeah. Like they do for fires or all the other things that we,
exactly. I received a phone call from a fire chief yesterday. I won't say where, but he stated basically he's been doing this for 32 years. They've never had to put a firefighter in the water, but he thinks it's time that they be trained awareness level. And that for those that were interested, perhaps to go on to the technician level. And I said, basically, you've just jinxed yourself, because you just told me that in 32 years, you've never had to put anybody in the water.
Guaranteed tomorrow you will. Yeah,
exactly. It's just a matter of time. And again, if any department has any kind of water venue within their jurisdiction, whether it's a water park or a river, a lake, a stream, a hot tub, they should be trained at the awareness level. And if the technical expertise is required to put personnel in the water, they better get a personnel trained and equipped at the technician level as well. And the money, it's very expensive to do that. And as an example, an ice rescue suit costs approximately $1,000. So if you're going to put, personnel in the water to be trained at the ice rescue technician level, you don't just need one suit. You need a backup person as well. You need shore-based personnel wearing protective gear as well. So it's very expensive. But again, there is a standard, and it's the NFPA 1670 standard for technical rescue, that basically states, again, the authority having jurisdiction needs to do a threat assessment. You need to determine the level of operational capability required of their personnel, and then plan for, train for, and acquire the resources necessary to deal with the incident.
Now, so is that paid for out of the fire department's budget?
There are federal grants that are available. However, it's very difficult to get those grants. A lot of the grants are being used for apparatus and personnel to staff stations and such. Mm-hmm. But as an example, we just did some major training for the state of Vermont, where several departments were able to get state grants just for their personnel to be trained and equipped at the ice rescue and water rescue level.
Nice. So you've mentioned, the awareness level, the technician level. What are some of the other levels? Is that where it ends, or does it keep going?
There's three levels: the awareness, the operations, and the technician. Basically, the awareness level is basically just classroom and basic shore-based rescue skills and such. Whereas the technician level, it's the personnel that are putting on their suits and getting in the water to perform a rescue.
Got it. And what do you think is kind of the best thing that, people who learn these different levels get out of it? Obviously they learn water safety. Is there, maybe broader applications for their everyday job as a EMT or a firefighter, or?
Well, it certainly makes their jobs a lot more interesting.
Sure.
We've had people that have attended our training who have stated that it's the best training they've ever had. But our philosophy is unlike most training in the first responder area, where you spend a lot of time standing around with your hands in your pockets waiting for your turn. In our training programs, they are constantly and intensively ongoing with their training. And as an example, we have our annual International Water Rescue Trainer Academy coming up this a week from tomorrow.
Okay.
And it goes Thursday through Sunday. And just as an example,
how many years have you had that?
This will be our 13th annual.
Wow. And you've done it 13 years in a row?
Right. And we've actually done 14 within the 13 years.
Okay.
But we have firefighters coming from Washington, Minnesota, Michigan, Virginia, New Jersey, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Ontario, and I'm sure a couple other states. But they'll come in. We'll start Wednesday.
It's going to be in Maine.
It's going to be in Maine. It's actually in Portland, Maine. Okay. We'll have classroom from 3 to 5:30, and then from 6:30 to 10 o'clock at night Thursday. We spend Friday morning for 3.5 hours in the pool, Friday afternoon for 3.5 hours in the pool. We go to a river for 3 hours Friday night and do night ops. Saturday morning we're back in the pool for 3.5 hours.
So let's break this down a little bit. So you do the first day, you have from you said 6 to 10, right?
They're 3 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night.
So what are you doing at 9 o'clock at night? Is that actually classes? Is it more of a dinner or?
No, it's classroom. We'll take an hour break and we'll feed them. We'll have dinner catered in, but we'll go through classroom and instructional methodology and ropes and knots and such.
Are you doing things that need to be done at night? Is that what's happening? Or is it just you're trying to get the most time as you can out of the
Thursday we're just doing all classroom.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that Friday we can spend the time in the pool, Friday morning, Friday afternoon, Friday in the river.
So what are you doing in the pool?
Basically learning basic skills, spinal injury management. We'll be testing their swimming capabilities, types and uses of PFDs, swimming rescues.
Explain to folks what a PFD is.
Personal flotation device, life jacket. But for first responders, we use a special type of PFD. Okay. And it's a type 5 vest that provides anywhere from 25 to 30 pounds buoyancy, but it also has a harness on it so that these firefighters can be tethered to their boat or tethered from shore. They can go out and do a swimming rescue, and once they grab the victim, because they're tethered, they can be pulled back into shore or back to a boat and such. But we'll do night ops Friday night in the Presumpscot River in Westbrook, Maine. Okay. And then we'll.
And what does that look like?
Well, basically, we're operating under flashlights and chemical lights.
Okay.
Performing spinal injury and moving water. We'll be doing shore-based rescues, again, moving water, so that unlike in a pool where you have a victim floating in the water and you throw a line to them, they're floating downstream and you need to throw the line just right in terms of timing to get to them. We'll also be doing swimming rescues where the rescuer is tethered to shore, and as the victim's floating downstream, the rescuer from shore needs to time his entry into the water just right and swim upstream, basically grab the victim into a bear hug, and then they're tethered downstream and rescued from there, and hopefully nobody gets by us. So we'll do that Friday night, and then Saturday afternoon we're going to do.
So do you use a real person? Do you use like a dummy?
Oh yeah. We'll have.
So do you float by yourself? How does it?
Oh yeah, we'll have 18 people out there training, of which 9 people will be serving as rescues from shore, and 9 people will be floating downstream one at a time.
Gotcha.
So, but it's again labor intensive. You'd have an upstream victim entering the water. You'd have a downstream rescue with a throw bag. You have a downstream safety person in case that victim got away. So we've got all kinds of redundancy built into this in terms of safeguards. We've never had a significant injury during a class, and hopefully that will continue.
Knock on every wood you can. Yeah.
Knock on wood. And then Saturday afternoon, we're going to be in the ocean venue.
Okay.
And actually, after the pool session Saturday morning, they'll come to Kennebunkport at that point. They're going to have lunch at a resort, and then we're going to inflate 4 boats and send them upstream in the river out to the ocean, and then they'll have to land in the waves on the beach without capsizing.
Wow.
And then from the ocean, we'll have a series of rescues in the surf conditions. And then we finished that day, that ocean session, by putting
You mind describing that a little more? I mean, what that actually,
sure.
I want to get into it because it's super interesting, and I'm a detailed person. So, I think it doesn't do it justice just to say that you're doing, ocean rescue training. I think people can, maybe get the idea, but I know that, to rescue someone in an ocean from a float, a vessel that's, floating that you've blown up essentially, is a complicated and really, one might say, exciting endeavor.
Well, what they'll be doing in the ocean, basically, prior to hitting the ocean environment, we will have a river session. We'll have 3 pool sessions, and they're basically going to take all the skills and principles that they learned in those venues and apply them to the ocean session.
Is that because the ocean is the most difficult of the 3?
No, not necessarily. But now we've got wave that we haven't had before, and you're trying to immobilize a victim while you've got wave action. So it's critical that the rescuer who's taking C-spine control, as an example, has his back to the waves so that he can be protecting the airway of the victim as the waves wash over him.
Right.
But one of the last evolutions we'll be doing at the ocean is we'll take a mannequin, we're going to throw him over the jetty, and the rescuers will be faced with accessing the victim, immobilizing the victim, and then extricating the victim either up the rocks or onto a boat in order to extricate the victim and get him to EMS. So they'll be doing scenario-based sessions like that. One of the things that we do, one of the first things we do after we land the boats is a jetty jump, in which it'll be high tide at that point. We plan the session around when high tide is going to be, but they'll actually be jumping from the top of the jetty into the ocean, trying to catch the wave as best they can. But it's always a very exciting situation. And many of the students have never even seen the ocean before. Again, we've got people coming from Minnesota and Michigan and so forth, and they've never seen the ocean. So this will be interesting for them. A couple of years ago, we had some people from South Carolina, and as we're driving up the coast in Kennebunkport to get to the beach, one guy looks to his left and says, like, "Holy cow!" And we're driving around a corner, and next guy says, except that's not what he said. The next one repeats himself, and I came around the corner and saw the waves, and I said the same thing, and they said, it doesn't give us a lot of faith and confidence when the instructor says that too. But the bigger the waves, the more exciting it's going to be, the harder it's going to be for us to do our jobs, but it's a training that no one will ever forget. Absolutely. And then after that, we go back to the classroom and do some practice teaching in the classroom. And then Sunday morning, we're going to be at another river where they'll be doing some more scenario-based situations. And then we finish up Sunday afternoon with classroom and graduation. And then I'm off on a plane to Atlanta, Georgia for my speaking engagement.
So does everyone graduate?
We hope so.
Okay.
These are all representatives from fire and rescue departments. The prerequisite is that they be in good physical condition, that they have some teaching experience, that they be good swimmers. And again, these are representatives from many different fire and rescue departments. So hopefully they've sent us the best.
So I was going to ask, so it's not like the entire department gets trained. They send almost like a special forces Navy SEAL unit to you to get trained specifically in this, so that they have, a handful of people. Right.
They'll send us 1 to 3 people, and they're basically being trained as instructors so that now they can return and train their own personnel and the curriculum and so forth. So, but it's labor intensive. I've got a faculty of 2 other instructors, one from Rhode Island, one from New Hampshire, that'll be assisting. And again, we go from basically 8 o'clock every morning until 10 o'clock at night, and for 4 days. So it's a tough situation, but it's a great training experience.
Yeah, and it sounds like Maine might be the perfect spot to do it. You've got the ocean, the rivers there. that might be hard to recreate anywhere else.
Exactly. And when we do ice rescue, it's basically the same schedule. We do a classroom all Thursday. We do ice in the morning, ice Friday afternoon, ice Friday night, night ops. The exact same schedule, except we're totally on and through the ice.
So when do you do the ice training?
We do a ice rescue trainer academy every February, 4 days.
Okay.
And then we also do ice rescue technician courses January, February, and March.
So I want to get to the ice training in a second because that's super fascinating. But before we do, the training you're doing this Thursday, when it applies to regular people, if you had to give, people watching who probably aren't firefighters and EMS, they could be, but chances are they're moms and dads and regular folks. What advice would you give somebody who is, who sees someone drowning and they need to get them out? I would say go, we'll say in a pool first, and then a river and an ocean. What would you do?
Well, it doesn't matter what venue it is.
Okay.
We want them, number one, to be safe. If there's one victim, we don't want it to expand to 2 or multiple victims.
Sure.
So we want them to, number one, call 911 with the expectation that hopefully the fire and rescue personnel and police officers that are responding are trained and equipped. And secondly, while they're waiting for rescue to arrive, they can attempt to perform a shore-based or boat-based rescue. And by that, we mean that they can extend their reach, throw something to the victim, extend something to the victim, but don't go in the water unless they're trained and equipped to do so.
Gotcha. Yeah. And that applies obviously to all kinds. So
correct. And as far as ice, what we advocate is that people need to, our philosophy is that no ice should ever be considered as safe ice. And with that in mind, if you're going out onto the ice, you should carry a P-less plastic whistle to alert people if there's an emergency.
So what do you mean by a P-list? What does that mean?
There are some whistles that are metal. If you put a metal whistle in your mouth during the winter time, it may be there until spring. But by P-less, we mean that some whistles have a P inside, a cork P that needs to vibrate to produce a sound. If that P gets wet, it no longer produces a sound. So there are P-less whistles that are made that don't depend on a ball to rotate in the whistle to generate a sound. So we recommend a P-less plastic whistle. We also recommend that people wear a float coat if they're going to be out on the ice, and to carry ice picks so that if they fall through the ice, they can pick their way back out onto the solid ice and then get themselves to safety. But regardless of what the situation is, whether it's water or ice, we recommend that call 911, only attempt a shore-based rescue. And as far as ice, we recommend you keep your dogs and pets off the ice, because about 75% of the incidents every year are triggered as a result of an animal going through the ice and humans now going out trying to save them. Right. But it's typically the animals that survive and the humans do not.
Oh, wow. Is that advice the same for, at least for ice is probably similar, but for regular water, is the advice the same for children? If a child falls into the water, do you have the same advice?
Yes and no. And I have the same advice in terms of being a first responder to keep yourself safe, only attempt a shore-based rescue. But the reality is, and that even goes for pets, it would be hard set to say that I'm not going to go after my dog or I'm not going to go after my child.
Right.
But hopefully people are trained and equipped to do so and do so safely. But the first responders need to be called so they can be on their way and respond. The other thing that we're concerned about, and we teach this in both our water rescue and ice rescue training programs, is how to escape from a submerged vehicle, and for the first responders, how to penetrate a submerged vehicle in order to effect a rescue. Right now, for those that aren't aware of it, most of the vehicles being made today, as of this past 2 years, the side windows and the doors are now being made of laminated glass instead of tempered glass.
Okay.
In the past, we used to state that if you go off the road, you need to disengage your seatbelt. You need to open your window, and if your window doesn't open, we recommended that you shatter the window using a pick or a hammer, or whatever the case may be.
And I've seen like those pocket knives that have like a pointed end at the bottom, so you can smack the window and hopefully break it. Yeah.
But the problem is those devices only work on tempered glass.
Okay.
And the new vehicles are, again, for the most part, now being made with laminated glass instead. So you cannot shatter these windows any longer.
Oh, wow. So
if your battery shorts out and you can't open the window, you basically cannot escape.
Okay.
So that's the federal government is, in their infinite wisdom, has stated that to the car manufacturers, we want you to develop a system that's going to prevent people from being ejected in a collision. So
now did they do this because it was safer? Okay, so they did it for collisions.
In order to prevent ejections. However, if people are wearing seatbelts and shoulder harnesses, and now we have airbags, there are very few people that are being ejected. But the law went into effect 15 years ago that by this date, you're going to have to come up with this anti-ejection system. And the easiest way to do that is to replace the tempered glass with laminated glass. So that's what's happening now. And again, if you can't open your window, you're stuck. So
and I wonder, and I don't know the stats on this, obviously, or the physiology, but I wonder which is worse, ejecting through a windshield, or flying with such force that you would have been ejected and smashing up against the laminated glass. Part of me thinks it might be better for the person to just go through the window.
Right. But if you're wearing seatbelts and shoulder harnesses and so forth, and you've got airbags, the ejections aren't that critical anymore.
As common as they were 15 years ago.
Right. Now, at the same time, we're dealing with 1,500 submerged vehicle incidents every year.
Wow. I didn't realize that many.
And the death rate is 400 to 600 people. Now that we have laminated glass instead of tempered glass in the new cars, the frequency of incidents aren't going to decrease. They'll probably remain the same, but the deaths are most likely going to increase because occupants aren't going to be able to get out of the vehicles, and fire and rescue personnel arriving at the scene are going to have a much more difficult time getting into the vehicle. Because
there's no way to break the window. You can't open the door, right? It's impossible. The water pressure, right?
The water pressure against the door makes it almost impossible to open, as well as the fact that you may have structural damage to the vehicle from going down the embankment into the water. So you may not be able to open the doors. As far as the windows, firefighters used to carry spring-loaded window punches. They no longer work. So the only way you can penetrate a side window or a front window these days is to use a saw. A lot of the saws are battery powered.
Sure.
They don't work in the water.
And they take a long time.
Right. So you need to use a manual saw to cut the glass.
Oh, no.
And it's going to take time to do so. So the federal government needs to be looking at highways, especially down in Florida, where you've got, so many bodies of water along the road. But we need to put up appropriate barriers to prevent vehicles from going off the road and into the water.
I am a fan of water safety barriers in general, so that's always a good idea. Yep. Whether they're around a pool or on the side of the road. So because most people watching this are looking for child safety advice. What are some things that you tell people? That's specific to what you do. As it pertains to child safety and water safety, children around the water.
One of the things that we do is when we train firefighters and police, whether it be at the technician level or as an instructor, we encourage them that they need to go back to their communities, and we're not just concerned about the training of the first responders. We need to educate the public about water safety.
Right.
As an example, we know that there's a great frequency of bathtub drownings.
Right.
So we want to educate the firefighters and police officers about the fact that we need to educate the people about the need for barriers around pools, the need for layers of protection in order to prevent unauthorized access into the water. We need to educate parents about never leaving children unattended in bathtubs. In fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics advocates that only a mature 4-year-old, or even better, a 6-year-old, should not be left unattended in a bathtub. And most of the public doesn't know that. So we're trying to educate the police and firefighters and EMS to not only train their own personnel, but to educate the public about general water safety practices. One of the things that I do as an forensics expert in drowning aquatic injury cases, I look at every incident in terms of what could have been done to prevent the incident, how quickly the incident or its potential was recognized, and how effectively the incident or its potential was managed. And unfortunately, I have so many cases where, because the layers of protection weren't there, a child was able to get unauthorized access into the water. And that means pool safety fences, it means supervision, it means doors and windows that are locked and out of reach of young children. It means pool alarms and such, but we need to be sure that the layers of protection are adequate in order to prevent children from getting to the pool during a lapse or lack in adult supervision.
And especially because we all know, adult supervision can and does fail.
Right.
The majority of drownings happen when a parent was supposed to be supervising. We're all human. People have multiple children. It's a tough thing to watch a very mobile toddler 24 hours a day. And
you and I happen to know an individual who recently lost a child and has another one that's significantly injured as a result. Sure. But this was a case where 2 kids they got up in the morning, the mother gave them their bottles, she put them back into their crib like she always does. She fell asleep. Parents do that. And these kids who had never climbed out of their crib before were able to get out of the crib. They were able to get out into the pool area because the door wasn't latched properly. And it wasn't their fault. It was because of a problem in the door. And they were able to access the water, and one child drowned, the other one was severely injured.
Yeah, and he probably has, I would say he does have, permanent, lifelong, mental and physical disabilities,
right,
as a result of that.
And this was a lapse in adult supervision, and every parent has experienced what I call a "Where's Johnny" episode.
Right.
The child is with you, and all of a sudden you turn around and the child is gone. And that's why these layers of protection need to be there, so that in the event of a lapse in adult supervision, the child can't get access into the water.
Yeah, it's funny. I've told this story, probably, 3 times in the last couple of days. But every parent has a story that's funny in hindsight about their child, covering themselves in peanut butter or drawing all over a wall. And I always use that example as one that if they had chosen to get to the pool and you didn't have some kind of pool fence, they would have ended up in the pool. Thankfully
Exactly.
they just decided to go for the peanut butter, but that you just got lucky in that scenario.
Right. And unfortunately, I have had in excess of 350 cases that I've consulted on. And, the majority of these are young children, and the majority of these have occurred during a lapse in adult supervision. And it's because the layers of protection weren't there, or the child was able to breach a fence or a gate or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we need to be sure that there are child safety fences and gates and latches on windows and doors that are self-closing and self-latching and such.
So I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if she's still watching, but Marie Blizzard, are you know her?
No.
Marie Blizzard, well, she knows you.
Okay.
She says that Gerry is very dedicated to his work, and she has learned a lot from you. So, go her.
Okay.
That's fantastic. So the training you offer, what are some avenues that, public and safety, the public safety and rescue agencies can get the sort of training you've talked about?
The American Red Cross offers training programs. The YMCA does. The National Drowning Prevention Alliance has a great deal of information on their website. But there's a lot of information that's available through the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And if you go to cpsc.gov and put it in the search for swimming pools, there's all kinds of information that's available. Mm-hmm. But we also ask for the pediatricians to be involved as well. And that means that if a pediatrician is meeting with a family and the family says we have a pool, you ask, is there a child safety fence and gate around the pool? Are the windows and doors latched and locked appropriately? Are there window alarms and pool alarms and so forth that are in place? So the pediatricians can help a lot in this case.
Sure.
At the same time, there are other avenues as well, child birth classes and so forth. Swimming and water safety should definitely be a part of that, so that we can prevent these tragic incidents from occurring in the first place.
So you mentioned you do a lot of consultation work too on drowning cases, legal and otherwise, right?
Right.
So tell me something about that work.
Well, I've got a case right now as an example in California, and I can't go into too many details, but this was a case where a school outing, a tragic incident in which a 13-year-old got into water over his head, struggles at the surface of the water for 20 seconds, and submerges. There are lifeguards present. In fact, there are like 9 lifeguards present. The child is underwater for 2 minutes and nobody observes him. Finally, he's brought to the surface, and there's a very good chance that this child could have been successfully resuscitated had the guards acted appropriately. However, for the next 7 minutes, this child was floated around in the water with a backboard, thinking that this was a diving accident. No one checked his breathing. No one checked his cardiac stat. So he's finally brought out of the water after 9 minutes without breathing and without pulse. And it's a very tragic incident. And again, had the lifeguards been appropriately positioned, appropriately trained, had appropriate supervision gone on with the supervisors, this incident should have been recognized at its onset before the submersion even occurred, or once the submersion did occur, appropriate intervention to get the child out of the water and begin effective resuscitation efforts. And we'd have an entirely different outcome today.
To think that, literally education would have made the difference between someone, being okay or not okay is, it's frustrating and it's heartbreaking and, it's sad.
And this was a situation where the child was in the middle of the pool. There's no way this could have been even considered to be a diving accident.
Right.
Yet it was treated as that, and no one assesses his breathing or cardiac rhythm. So it's just a tragic incident. And I've got, so many similar cases like that. I had another case in California where, and it's on our website at lifesaving.com, but a 4-year-old was at camp for the first day. We have a video of the counselor throwing the child up and catching him in his arms 12 times. And then on the 12th time, the counselor lets the kid go. The kid's 48 inches tall. He's let go in 4.5 feet of water. And with 2 lifeguards present and the child struggling in the water and then floats at the surface of the water for 8 minutes, and nobody sees him, not the 2 counselors, not the 4 counselors that were there, not the 2 lifeguards. Nobody saw this kid, and he's floating in the water for 8 minutes, undetected by anyone. And had the lifeguards been strategically positioned and vigilant in their duties, the distress should have been recognized within 20 seconds.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Each one of my cases is more tragic than the next.
So what is it you look for in a case?
As I mentioned, in simplistic terms, I'll look at what could have been done, what should have been done to prevent the incident. That means that there should have been barriers, there should have been vigilant and strategically positioned lifeguards who were qualified, not just certified, and that these lifeguards were scanning in a appropriate and effective method and so forth.
So if a lifeguard watches this, what is something, if you had a piece of advice that you could give them I'm sure it's a whole curriculum, but if you could tell them one thing, what would it be? Or 1 or 2 things maybe?
Well, unfortunately, lifeguards being trained today, and they're taught CPR, and they're taught that CPR saves lives. Mm-hmm. Well, first and foremost, CPR doesn't save lives.
No, not drowning saves lives.
The only thing CPR does is sustains the victim in this gray area between clinical and biological death until we can intervene with advanced life support, get them to a hospital and so forth. So CPR doesn't save lives. That being said, lifeguards need to realize that you don't have any second chances. Your job is to prevent this incident from occurring. If you can't prevent it, as soon as the incident occurs, you need to be vigilant and strategically positioned so you can recognize it at its onset and then intervene appropriately and deal with the incident before we have a deterioration into cardiac arrest. And we know that a drowning victim typically will struggle at the surface of the water for 20 to 60 seconds.
So let's talk about that real quick, because I know from doing this for a long time that drowning doesn't look like drowning. Mario Vitone put out that famous article that has been spread throughout the world now, but unfortunately most people still don't know that drowning doesn't look like what we see on television. That it's not people thrashing about, it's not arms there, there's no yelling. So just real quick, do you want to explain to people what to look for in a drowning victim? What does somebody look like when they're drowning?
Well, basically the first indication is that the victim typically will go vertical. Mm-hmm. That they may have started in a horizontal position, but now they go vertical. Their legs are ineffective in their kicking, and all the action basically is in their arms, and the arms are typically going out laterally. So the first thing to look for is somebody going from a horizontal to a vertical position in the water. They look like they're playing in the water, when in reality they're engaged in a life and death struggle, and they're only able to sustain themselves for 20 to 60 seconds. They can't call out for help because their priorities get air in, not verbalize anything out.
And that's not a decision. They're physiologically unable to call out for help. Their body won't let them yell out.
That's correct. And at the same time, during the struggling process, they may be aspirating water into the airway, which triggers what's referred to as a laryngeal spasm. And it's a reflex spasm of the airway that shuts down and prevents water from going into the lungs. But it also prevents air from going into the lungs. And that's why they can only struggle for 20 to 60 seconds before they're rendered unconscious. Their heart continues beating, however, for up to several minutes. So going to my case in California, the fact that this child's distress was recognized after being on the bottom for 2 minutes, there's a good chance he still had cardiac rhythm when he was brought to the surface. If he didn't, had he been brought out of the water immediately and provided positive pressure ventilation and chest compression CPR and had an AED available, chances are we would have had a good outcome. But because of the fact he was floated around in the water for 7 minutes while his cardiac rhythm is deteriorating to nothing, by the time EMS got there, it was basically too late.
So you look for somebody that turns vertical, that their arms extend laterally. I've heard they do like a doggy paddling motion with that background.
That's correct. And so the action they're doing is not making any forward progress. So the first thing is going from horizontal to vertical. Second thing is not making any forward progress, and they're moving. Don't look and expect them to be yelling and calling for help. But the other thing too is some victims simply go unconscious as a result of the fact that they were struggling and somebody else thought it was play. Right. But I've had numerous cases where victims have either been floating at the surface of the water or on the bottom of the pool or whatever. And even lifeguards have seen them and not recognized the fact that this is an emergency situation. I had a case at a very prestigious prep school where the lifeguard saw the victim lying on the bottom of the pool with his arms outstretched like this, and she assumed he was timing himself. And she allowed him to lie on the bottom of the pool for as much as 20 minutes before anybody recognized we have an emergency.
Wow. For 20 minutes?
20 minutes. So, like I said, each one of these cases is just more tragic than the next.
I mean, that's mind-boggling.
This was a case where the lifeguard was not appropriately trained. The lifeguard was not strategically positioned. The lifeguard was not qualified. May have been certified, but wasn't qualified to work at this facility, recognize the hazards, identify the risks, and intervene appropriately.
Have you ever had a drowning incident? Have you ever almost drowned?
I have.
Yeah?
I have. I was in a kayak once, and I capsized in the kayak and wasn't able to self-extricate myself as quickly as I would have liked.
Right.
I've had
how old were you?
I was probably 16 or so.
Okay.
One of the things that I used to do when I was with the Red Cross in Houston is we used to do a river rescue excursion. We used to bring rescue personnel to the Guadalupe River and basically set up rescue stations on Memorial Day weekend, July 4th weekend, and Labor Day weekend. And we used to pull hundreds of people out of the water that were in distress. Not to say they would have drowned had we not been there, but we know there certainly would have been drownings had we not been there.
Sure.
But one weekend we had some bad weather, so we thought we would put ourselves in the same predicament that we were pulling people out from. Mm-hmm. And one of them was what you call a low head dam. And when water runs from one elevation to the next, it creates a backflow. So I decided that we would rig some lines, and we put ourselves in that situation to experience what it was we were pulling people from. And I put myself in, and I was getting recirculated. I got sucked down and spit out and dragged back to the face of the dam, and sucked down and spit out and dragged back. And each time I tapped my head, saying I'm okay. Mm-hmm. And about the fourth or fifth time that I got sucked down.
So is that the safe signal? You tap your head so people know
you're okay? Tap your head, and okay. people on shore would do the same thing. They'd ask you, "You okay?" And if you do that back. But anyway, the fourth or fifth time I got sucked down, I got snagged on something underneath. And had I not had a knife with me to cut myself free, I'd probably still be there.
Right. They would have assumed you're still okay, like you were the other 4 times.
Yep.
And that would have been it. Wow. So good thing you had a knife. You literally cut yourself free?
I cut myself free. And that's why we advocate that rescue personnel always carry a knife on them.
Yeah.
In fact, we recommend 2 knives. One knife attached to your life jacket, and one knife attached to the opposite side of your body down by your ankle, so that if you can't get to one, you can get to another.
Sure.
So, and that's the other thing. We talk about the fact that fire and rescue personnel not only need to be trained, but they need to be adequately equipped as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you hadn't had that knife, you would have been stuck. You know?
I had a situation as an expert, had a drowning case in West Virginia. Mm-hmm. Where a guided raft trip, one of the rafts capsized and threw out 6 people in the water. And they had downstream safety, and they had rescue lines set up and so forth. So they had multiple people hanging onto the line. And somebody yelled from shore, let go of the line, meaning that there's more downstream safety. Let go of the line and they'll catch you downstream. What happened is the rescuer on shore let go of his line.
Oh, no.
And the line ended up wrapping itself around the legs of a female victim. The guide didn't have a knife, which he should have. So as a result, he swam out there. He couldn't untangle her. He had to swim back to shore, ruffle through rucksacks and try to find a knife. Finally found a knife, swam out there and cut her free. And she drowned as a result of that incident. And again, that's why people need to be appropriately equipped, not just with their life jackets, but with knives and whatever else may be necessary to intervene appropriately.
Jeez. So how many of these cases have you had?
I've had in excess of 350 cases to date. We currently have about 30 ongoing cases going on. In fact, in the past month, I've been down to Houston for a drowning investigation, West Palm Beach for a drowning investigation, Orlando for a drowning investigation. I had a trial in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I've got another trial coming up next month in Miami. I've got a diving accident investigation to do in Key Largo in the next couple of weeks. So we're pretty busy.
Well, next time you're in South Florida, let me know. You can come by and see how we make mesh pool safety fencing.
I'm trying to figure out how the chair in the background moves every once in a while.
Oh, you know what that is? That's my trash can. I have a voice activated trash can.
Okay.
And it airs on the side of assuming you want it to open than not opening. So
got it.
That's hilarious. That's opening. That's hysterical. I didn't realize that was happening. So do you normally work for the plaintiff or the defendant?
It's about 90% for the plaintiff,
Okay.
10% for the defense. Interesting enough, I've got 3 active cases going on right now for the defense.
And now, I mean, you've got all these cases going on. You're doing the training. Are you by yourself? I mean, do you have employees?
I've got instructors that assist me in my training. We've also trained 350 instructors around the country in Canada, so they're doing training as well. And
Sure.
Our job is just to develop the curriculums and support them in their efforts.
Right.
But as far as my work as a consultant, as a forensic expert, that's myself. I've got some people that assist me in preparing my work, but pretty much just me. But
the scheduling, the booking, the work, the administrative stuff, that's all you.
Right.
That's impressive. That's I am not good at that, so I envy you. So you said about 90% plaintiff, 10% defendant.
Right. I just recently had a.
You have a preference?
Yes. Okay. I will only take a case for the defense if it's a righteous case.
Okay.
For instance, I've had, and I will only take a plaintiff's case if it's a righteous case.
Right.
A classic example is.
How do you define a righteous case?
Well, I had one case that resulted in a $130 million jury verdict.
Okay.
As a result of that case, I had lawyers coming out of the woodwork who wanted to hire me as the expert for their case. One lawyer contacts me and said, I represent a family of a 10-year-old who drowned in a public swimming pool.
Okay.
So I started asking questions. What time did this occur? 10 o'clock at night. I said, well, okay. So I'm figuring maybe the fence was breached and it wasn't intact. I said, any problem with the fence? Yeah. I said, well, how tall was the fence? He said 10 feet. And fences only need to be 5 feet.
Right.
I said, and he said, and there wasn't any rescue equipment out there. I said, it occurred at 10 o'clock at night.
Right.
Why would there be rescue equipment?
Or anybody.
Or anybody. And I'm trying to figure out, how did this kid get over the fence? And finally said, what did you expect him to put razor barb over the fence? And he said, well, there was razor barb over the fence, except for the small section where this kid was able to climb the fence and get over a 10-foot fence. So, that's the kind of case that I will not take.
Right.
I've also had cases where the plaintiff who said, well, the lifeguard failed to identify the victim on the bottom of the lake and recognize his drowning, only to find out that there was no struggle at the surface of the water, and that by the time the lifeguards were notified of the incident, it was 45 minutes later. So again, that's to me not a righteous case. If there's no surface struggle, you can't expect the lifeguards to recognize the fact that somebody is submerged. You need a credible witness to tell the lifeguards immediately and give them an idea what part of the water this person went down. So, like I said, I scrutinize the cases that I take and will only take a case that I believe in. Now, that being said, I recently had a murder case in which I defended the defendant as the expert, and this involved a woman that was charged with shaken baby syndrome.
Oh, wow.
Only to find out that the child, upon autopsy, there was indications of water inhalation.
Okay.
And I talked to the jury about the incidence of bathtub drownings, and she was acquitted due to reasonable doubt. And again, it was all because there was water inhalation. The child had been in a tub, and we believe that the child's airway became compromised while he was in the tub and went downhill from there.
So she was charged with murder of the baby that she just lost.
Correct.
Which, I mean, bad enough that she already, lost her baby. But then to be, wow, that's tragic. I'm glad that it had hopefully the right outcome,
And we hope it was the right outcome.
Right.
It's up to a jury to decide, but there was a case where because of the water inhalation, it gave us the indication this could have been a drowning incident. And again, she stated the child had been in the bathtub prior to the child developing airway distress.
And so, I mean, that sounds kind of like an outlier, but are there common themes that you see throughout your cases?
Most of the residential backyard pool drownings are because of inadequate barriers.
Okay.
Most of the hotel and resort drownings are because...
So, I mean, and obviously this is a little bit biased on my part, but you would recommend then that obviously people should have some kind of barrier around their pool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. If the home serves as has an exit, a door, a window out to the pool area,
which almost all of them do. Yeah.
Which all of them do, then that pool should have a fence around an isolation fence to prevent a child who can get out into the yard from getting into the pool.
Right.
Our hotel, motel, resort drownings are typically because of the lack of supervision provided by the management and also by inadequate barriers. And our open water incidents are typically due to, we have a saying in the police and fire service that what keeps us in business is Mother Nature and stupidity. And there's a lot of stupidity that goes on. People that are inebriated, that are behind the wheel of a boat or going out and diving into shallow water and things like that. So basically people need to use some common sense. People need to safeguard themselves in a lot of ways. But as far as open water areas, anytime a child has access to the water, they need to be vigilantly, actively supervised.
I've heard before that when it comes to open water situations, that the accident actually happens before they get on the water. Most of the time when there's an open water scenario, the mistake was made on shore, by not preparing properly, by not bringing, life jackets, by not making sure the vessel is properly maintained. That most of the time in open water scenarios, it wasn't a mistake made on the water. It was something made before they even got on the boat.
Correct. And right now we're dealing with, this is now May 9th.
Yeah, May 9th. Yeah.
Our water temperature here is probably 45 degrees here in Kennebunkport, Maine.
That sounds terrible.
Memorial Day weekend, it might be 100 degrees outside. Mm-hmm. People are going to be out on the boats or out on the jetty and say, I'm going to jump in and cool off. Well, they're going to jump into 50-degree water, and they're going to experience what we refer to as a torso reflex. It's a gasp reflex. And if they jump in the water and the cold water hits their chest and the face, and they gasp, and the face is in the water at the time they do that, they aspirate this cold water into their airway and drown as a result. So we need to educate the public about, number one, always wear a life jacket when you're operating in and around cold water. And secondly, in order to prevent torso reflex, you need to jump in and cover your mouth and nose at the same time so that when you do gasp, you're not aspirating the water.
And everyone's experienced this torso reflex. If you've ever gone into any cold body of water, the first thing you do is you go, because you're so shocked by how cold it is.
Exactly.
But
just as we speak, we just got a call for an emergency medical incident.
Okay.
So I don't need to go just yet, but we're waiting.
That's interesting stuff. So we're talking about cold water, and then we'll wrap this up real quick, just in case something happens. So we talked a little bit about your ice training, but we didn't get too far into it. You want to go over that a little bit, and then we can call it?
Well, what we do with the ice rescue training is our curriculum basically is we give them a 2.5-hour classroom session, and then we put them out on and through the ice for 2.5 hours, bring them back for lunch and put them out on and through the ice for another 2.5 hours.
I hate cold weather. This sounds like a nightmare to me. Yeah.
Well, the suits that they wear are designed to keep them warm, afloat, and dry.
Okay.
And while they're wearing these suits, they actually can't overdress. We advocate that they just wear a long sleeve poly shirt, perhaps a fleece vest, and that's it, and shorts basically underneath. Otherwise, they get too hot. But these suits provide about 32 pounds buoyancy, and it keeps them warm and dry. Mm-hmm. At the same time, they're tethered at all times. And we'll put a victim in the water, And their job basically is to give them about 20 different evolutions, starting with no equipment at all, and then using basic elementary equipment, such as a sling or a buoyant sling or a ring buoy or a ladder or a backboard. And we advance throughout the day, more advanced, more technical skills. And then the afternoon session, we use basically specialized equipment that's designed specifically for ice rescue. But our philosophy is that when we teach the course, we provide the education that they can, every conceivable piece of equipment that might be on an ambulance or in a police car or on a fire truck, showing how that equipment can be used if you don't have the specialized equipment. But they during the evolutions, they work as a victim, they work as a primary rescuer, they work as a secondary rescuer, or they're a line tender. And they go through all 5 positions, and then they move on to the next evolution. So by the end of the day, again, they will have completed about 20, 21 skill evolutions on and through the ice. And it's a very exciting training that they do.
And they'll have experience what it's like to be a victim, right? To be rescued, which
correct.
is really invaluable, actually.
Right. And we take the philosophy in when we're doing the rescues that all our victims are passive. And the reason being is that if a firefighter responds to an incident where somebody's through the ice, if the victim has been in the water for 10 minutes or so, they no longer have the dexterity in their hands and their arms to assist in their own rescue. So for that reason, we teach them that every single skill we do, the victim cannot assist in his own rescue, and the rescuer needs to perform the rescue himself.
So I've read about what to do in the event of a falling into this before, and I know that you have a very short window of time that you can act in before hypothermia sets in, before your body shuts down, and
right.
There's a few things you should do immediately as soon as you fall in the water. So if you were walking on the ice and God forbid, and you didn't have the ice pick on you, God forbid, and you fell into the water, what should someone do?
Well, the very first thing is don't panic and control your breathing.
Right.
If that cold water hits your face, if you haven't experienced the dorsal reflex, chances are if you're holding onto the ice shelf, you're going to be hyperventilating.
Right.
So, but that's eliminating carbon dioxide, and that's going to make you pass out even sooner. So the first thing is to control your breathing. Try to slow it down. Well, hold on to the ice shelf. Get your body as horizontal as you can. Can I have the charger for this? And then swim onto the ice shelf. And once you're on ice, to roll away from the compromised ice so you can basically get to your knees and then make your way back to shore. But where you need to be, basically, if you fell through one section of ice, don't try to get to the other section of ice. You were on safe ice, go back to the same safe ice condition. But the important thing is, as soon as you hit the water, control your breathing, hold on to the ice shelf. You've got about 10 minutes where you can still have the dexterity you need to climb out. So kick your feet and try to swim onto the ice shelf and then roll away from the compromised ice.
So there's a technique, right, to climbing out of the ice. So you want to get as much as your upper body on top of the ice as possible. I think you get only 1 or 2 shots at. You can only do it 1 or 2 times before you run out of energy and you're going to end up stuck on the side.
Well,
you've got ice. I know you want to get your body kind of horizontal, right? Is that right?
Right. Get your body horizontal. Kick your feet. Try to swim onto the ice.
So not yank, but swim.
Right. And if you can get your elbows up there, again, use your elbows. And if you have ice picks, you can pick your way out as well. Right. That's why we encourage that everybody carries something like ice picks with you.
Yeah, and like you said, you're gonna pass out within a few minutes. So it's important that they get up on the side. So if they don't make it on, God forbid, they go unconscious. But better to go unconscious on the side of the ice than under the water. So
right, and if you're stuck in the ice and you can't get out, this sounds a little perhaps barbaric, but we recommend removing your gloves, placing your hands on the ice so your skin will stick to the ice so that if you are rendered unconscious, you're still at the surface.
Wow.
Otherwise, if you're unconscious and you can't hold onto the ice shelf,
You might slide off.
Exactly.
But so yeah, actually use your skin to adhere to the ice to keep you on.
Correct.
Wow. What's so important about knowing this is no one is going to think of that on their own, right? No one is going to think to take their own gloves off on the fly. So, I mean, that's why you kind of have to have this in your head already, when you go in these scenarios, because, you're not going to, invent that,
Right.
while you're sitting there. So,
but again, the most important thing is because of the fact that we advocate that no ice should ever be considered a safe ice.
Right. The prevention is the most important part.
Carry your whistle, carry your ice pick so that in the event this occurs, you can self-rescue while you're waiting for EMS to arrive.
Right. So horizontal, swim on, climb, and then roll away, not walk, because you don't want to break more ice as you're walking off, right?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've had a thing. Is there anything you want to leave people with? Any comments or any questions you got for me?
Just the fact that we are approaching swim season.
Sure.
Again, it's swim season all the time down in Florida, but in other parts of the country.
Yeah, it's water safety month right now, so that's in particular.
Right. And many parts of the country you're dealing with cold water, so you need to safeguard yourselves. And again, anytime life jackets aren't just for boats. If you're going to be operating, swimming, playing around the water, we recommend wearing life jackets for weekend non-swimmers all the time. But when you're dealing with cold water, you need to have life jackets as well to protect yourselves.
That's great advice, and I think the info that you've imparted has been really, really useful. So I really appreciate it, and thank you for the time. You've been super generous with your time, and hopefully you don't get called out onto a rescue right now, unless you want to, of course. But hopefully it goes on without you. And I really appreciate it, Gerry. And if next time you're in Florida, let me know.
Sure will.
I'm happy to have you come by. And if you or anybody else wants to see tomorrow, we're having on Alyssa. Alyssa is a water safety advocate, water safety expert. She helps run a nonprofit that was started after a child drowned, and she's another awesome human being. So we'll be talking to her tomorrow at 11:30 Eastern time. So
just tell you one quick story.
Yeah, please.
Just last week, I was flying down to West Palm Beach for a drowning investigation, and I connected in, I think, LaGuardia.
Okay.
And I'm way down there. I'm sitting next to a gentleman, and he asked me what I did, and I said, well, going down for a drowning investigation. And he said, my grandson drowned.
Oh, wow.
And it turns out I was the expert in his grandson's drowning case.
Oh, wow.
And the family also started a drowning prevention foundation as a result of that incident. So there's some good that came out of it, but just the coincidence of sitting on the plane talking to this individual who was the grandfather of this child whose family I represented.
Are you allowed to share the name of the foundation?
Actually, I can. It's the Zach Foundation.
Oh, I'm very familiar with them.
Right.
Yeah. No, we worked with them with the NDPA, and I've met them. They're nice people. So, yeah. Very good. Well, thanks, Gerry. I really, really appreciate this. This has been fantastic. Eric. And maybe we can do it again in the winter when we get into more ice and winter safety again.
Sounds great.
All right, okay. Thanks, Gerry. Take care.
Take care.